Greetings, comrades! You know, for a long time I wanted to make a video dealing with stereotypes about Russia, and now it's October and I realized the time has come. So, one of the most frequent questions from foreigners and one of the main stereotypes about the inhabitants of Russia is why Russian people do not smile often and in general look not very friendly. There's like 1,000 videos made about this already, repeating the same arguments that, yeah, just smiling for no reason is not customary and all that. The thing is, some people have a different explanation. Look at these pictures of Russia, they say, and tell me, would you ever want to smile if you were surrounded by these for 9 months of the year? Or by these? Imagine, you wake up, look out of the window, and a smile seems to fall off your face. How can you live in Russia and enjoy life, especially in the fall, when the leaves have fallen, the sky is covered with grey clouds, and any city becomes dull and gloomy? Well, today we will talk about it. Is everything in Russia really so grey, bleak and depressing? Or is it like everything else in the world, the fault of the United States? First of all, let's make it clear that this video is primarily aimed at those who have never been to Russia. Because those who have been, they have their own eyes, and they could assess for themselves how bright and colorful Russia can be, or how dreary and colorless it may look. But even those who have never been to Russia, I urge you to be cautious and not to accept my video as the ultimate truth. But still, let's return to the thesis I put forward. Both foreigners and locals often find Russia gloomy, depressing, and somewhat unfriendly. There must be some objective reasons for this, right? There are, and there are 3 of them. They are climate, architecture, and of course, propaganda. Let's start with the most obvious, climate and nature. After all, when we travel to tropical countries, what do we immediately see? A piercing blue sky, turquoise waves, white sand, and green palm trees. Just one look at this exuberance of colors and you will feel alive. And now let's look at Russia. First of all, it's no secret that some Russian cities, Murmansk, Norilsk, Vorkuta, live in polar night conditions for several months a year. Imagine that for weeks you have perpetual twilight and the sun does not appear from behind the horizon at all. Oh yes, there is also howling wind and temperature around -30°C and below. It's obvious that in such conditions of permanent semi-darkness the whole life will seem grey and depressing. And even the healthiest people will experience a drop in both productivity and mood.
Pam, pam, pam.
However, other Russian cities also experience a lack of sunshine in winter. Thus, even in the absence of clouds, for example, in Moscow, the sun could shine only for 7 hours a day in December and 7.5 hours in January. That is, even in theory, 2/3 of the day will definitely be dark in Moscow in winter. That leaves 1/3 of the day, when in theory it could be sunny with bright blue sky, right? No. Especially in the European part of Russia. If in Siberia in winter there are usually areas of increased atmospheric pressure in which it is cold but sunny, the cyclones come to the European territory of Russia every now and then and bring eternal grey clouds. For example, in the winter of 2023, according to the Meteorological Observatory of the Moscow State University, in December the sun shone for only 22 hours. In January, 1 hour less. There are 31 days in a month, multiplied by 24 hours, we get 744 hours in a month. Of these, it is dark or cloudy outside for 720 hours. Are you feeling this desire to live yet? In general, according to the same observatory, for the period from 1955 to 2017, in December on average the sun shone in Moscow only for 19 hours. In November and January, 32 hours each. In June, for example, 282 hours, much more. So, in total, in Russia's largest city, people hardly see the sun for at least 4 or 5 months out of 12 months a year. There is some crazy data. The cloudiest December was in 1968, when the sun did not shine at all. Not a single minute of sunlight for a whole month. What can add some colors when there's no sunshine around? Well, let's say plants. But obviously there is no green in winter and fall in Russia. all deciduous trees shed their leaves. Yes, there are also enough conifers in the taiga that could be green all year round, but the most common tree in Russia is larch, which also sheds its needles for the winter. So for 6 months of the year you can look at bare brown trunks covered in snow. Don't want snow? Well, you can have some ice. What else can bring little color to life in these conditions? Some sea, I guess. But it's also practically non-existent. No, Russia is surrounded by as many as 13 seas, but only the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea can be called warm. Most of Russia's sea coast is the Arctic Ocean and harsh parts of the Pacific Ocean. Almost no people live there, and even if they do, the very presence of ice-covered grey areas to the horizon does not give them much joy. Of course, there are also cities that are located by the relatively warm Sea of Japan or the Baltic Sea, Vladivostok or St. Petersburg, but in wintertime it does not do them any good either. Because of the proximity to the sea, there are constant temperature fluctuations there, either wet snow and mud or ice and penetrating wind. As a result, in 95% of cities in Russia, about 6 months a year, you see only 2 colors, grey and white. The only exceptions are the southern regions of the Caucasus, or, let's be honest, just Sochi. Is it possible to somehow brighten up your life in such conditions, to make it not so grey? Well, for example, going to the Maldives every October and coming back in April, a viable option. Or, somewhat simpler, start with yourself, namely with your clothes. If everyone in Russia put on a bright multicolored jacket in winter, it would be more pleasant to walk down the streets, but no. Well, for some reason it is not customary in Russia to dress brightly, especially for men. There are 2 reasons. The first is a strong legacy of Soviet times, when it was necessary not to stand out, to dress like everyone else, preferably in dark, unattractive clothes. The second is that the clothing manufacturers themselves set this tone. If you go to stores of famous sports brands in Moscow or to mass market stores, everything is monochrome. They don't bring bright colors to us. Apparently, this is the mentality, especially among the older generation. Okay, it didn't work out with clothes, but what about architecture? After all, a person can customize the environment around himself, create his own infrastructure for life. Do not have enough bright colors in nature, so build yourself a brightly colored dwelling and life will immediately become more cheerful. But, as you might have guessed, no. In the late 2010s, the internet was flooded with a wave of admiration for the aesthetics of Russian sad music, doomers, panelkas, and all that goes along with it. Take this guy, put him in this setting, play Russian post-punk in the background, and you will feel a tide of sadness, loneliness and hopelessness wash over him. Now imagine it's not a meme character, it's you, and you live like this day in and day out, and you'll immediately see what I'm talking about. And yes, some people of my generation are quite imbued with this aesthetic, and have even learned to find some special vibe in these endless grey rows of Brezhnevkas and Khrushchevkas around them, reminding them of their childhood. A childhood spent in hundreds of absolutely identical cities. Today there are songs and works of art dedicated to Soviet panel houses, music videos and photo shoots are shot against their backdrop, and videos about them gain millions of views. But if you think about it for a second, all these grey panel buildings with dirty seams, dark squares of small mosaic tiles broken off from the walls, hundreds of windows and balconies piled with unnecessary things, dominance of air conditioners and satellite dishes… Yes, it's all such a familiar and heartwarming post-Soviet reality. But it is just so grey and dull. 49% of all residential buildings in Russian cities are typical Soviet-era apartment buildings, conventional panel houses. Let me remind you that both in Khrushchev's time and to a slightly lesser extent in Brezhnev's time, practically any external decoration of a residential building was perceived as an excess that made construction more expensive and slower, while the Soviet people needed to build quickly and a lot. At that moment, all aesthetic issues were relegated to the back burner. Simplicity, cheapness, standard solutions that allowed to build faceless Hrushchevkas but very quickly came first. It is better to build 100 panel boxes than 20 houses with architectural excesses. To buy 10 buckets of paint and paint the wall bright yellow is unnecessary. It makes construction more expensive. Multiply these 10 buckets by tens of thousands of houses throughout the USSR and you will get millions of rubles from the budget, which would be better spent on something else. Now we remember that these Soviet houses were built mostly 50-60 years ago and during this time have completely lost their freshness, and we get a bleak picture. In summer and fall, at least leaves and grass hide it all. Thanks to Soviet architects, they planned cities quite well and paid attention to plants and greenery. But in winter and spring, in a typical residential area of a typical Russian city, it's just depressing to walk around. It's dark, slush everywhere, grey houses, grey snowdrifts, grey trees, grey cars, grey everything. Russia is for the sad. There are, of course, areas with pre-revolutionary buildings that look a little more cheerful. There are colors there, though pastel, but it's beautiful, and if they are also being renovated, they are twice as beautiful. Why can't you paint buildings in bright colors now? Well, you can actually. If there's anything to praise modern Russian apartment buildings for, it's that the developers often cover them with brightly colored plastic panels. Yes, living in a Brezhnevka is almost certainly more comfortable than in a new 35-story monstrosity somewhere near St. Petersburg, but the second ones still look much better from afar. Schools, kindergartens, hospitals, at least now they have started to paint them in bright colors, which at least dilute the general grayness a little. Again, you can always look at the example of the former Warsaw Pact countries, where even grey Hrushchevkas were sometimes turned into something nice and modern looking. Or even more so Finland, which with similar climatic conditions looks much more lively. And note that I have not yet touched on the perennial topic of what makes Russian cities look even drearier – the eternal mud. Hundreds of opinions and even scientific papers have been written about the causes of this phenomenon. If you want to be scientific, the main factors of dust and dirt load formation in the urban environment in Russia are low adaptation of infrastructure to high automobile density, unsatisfactory quality of territory maintenance, as well as the lack of a consistent approach to environmental management when carrying out works on territory improvement, excavation and repair and construction works. If a little bit simpler, lack of high curbs, a lot of sites with soil and sand, mismanaged construction sites and parking lots, and most importantly, outdated urban planning norms, according to which road verges are not properly separated from the roads. After any rain, this soil is carried out on the roads, gets on the wheels of cars, spread by them for kilometers, and as a result, these cars and everything around them are covered with a thin but strong layer of mud. Moreover, this scheme works even in winter. There is no rain, but then the municipal workers come out on the roads and generously spread sand, which immediately turns into mud. Or special reagents. Reagents melt snow, snow washes away mud, mud gets on the roads, an eternal mud cycle of grayness. And finally we come to the third point – propaganda. It would seem, well, what does propaganda have to do with it? Was it propaganda that placed Murmansk above the Arctic Circle, that covered the sun with clouds in Moscow? Or maybe propaganda made Khrushchev build tens of thousands of identical grey boxes in every city? No. But if you have never been to Russia yourself, then everything you know about it you get from some other sources that may have their own goals and agenda. Yeah, even me. Take a look at this video from a typical Russian city. And now this video. You can feel the difference, can't you? Depression, cold and gloom there, well here it's a whole palette of colors and exuberance of life in every pixel. Except it's the same city, and even the same street, and the same time of year. And the perception is changed literally with the click of a mouse. And who do you think knows how to use this technique best? Of course, the great and terrible Hollywood, the main weapon of American propaganda. Hollywood always shows Russia in a stereotypical way. Women in their furs, men in their alcoholism, everything is cold, blue and grey. The country is portrayed in the movies as a gloomy, dreary place where the sun does not shine and people look like a homogeneous mass. It's as if everything around is painted an unpleasant grey-blue color. But why as if? It is indeed painted by color correction. Remember the meme about the Mexican filter, how the country is always shown yellow and orange. There is also a Russian filter, but it's blue-grey. Let's not even take old movies about the Soviet Union, let's take the relatively fresh Red Sparrow. He is Jennifer Lawrence's character in Moscow. A typical Khrushchevka, almost no people on the streets, grey clothes, that unpleasant blue light. And now she goes to Europe and wow. She immediately has bright makeup, hair and clothes, and the city around her seems to come to life all by itself. Isn't that a miracle? And yes, can you think of a single Hollywood movie where Russia is visited in summer? No, only winter and snow. Otherwise, how will the viewer understand that the story is set in Russia? Only by the 100 dogs roaming around and the Ushanka hat on the main character. And yes, you can say that it is only for recognizability, so that the viewer would see the blue cold light and immediately understand, oh, it's Russia.
Here I come. Oh.
Or you can go the other way around and think that this is done to put the idea in people's heads. Russia. It's where everything is cold, gloomy and grey. In Russia there is gloom and poverty, while in the West there is light and beauty. A simple but very effective technique. Just like the fact that any Russian in American movies is a negative character. It's so hackneyed. Every Russian in a Hollywood movie is either a spy or a gangster, and sometimes for more variety, both a spy and a gangster. But seriously, Russia is of course very diverse. It can be grey, dull and depressing, or it can be vivid, colorful and very hospitable. And for every grey shot from the streets of Russian cities, I can find you 10 shots with brightly dressed smiling people, interesting buildings and stunningly beautiful nature. Again, you'll notice that I'm talking about winter. Winter, 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 winter. But I know it's hard to believe, in Russia it is still warm for about 6 months of the year. All this is just a matter of how the person giving you information, even in video format, can manipulate it. Did I lie somewhere? No. I just intentionally omitted about half the year from my story. And even in the cold season Russian cities can resemble a winter fairy tale, not a gloomy post-apocalyptic setting. Then why did I pour out so much negativity about grayness, cold and depression? Well, because I hate winter, that's why I'm in such a bad mood. Thanks for watching. If you wish to support the channel financially, you can do so with crypto or by subscribing to my Patreon. And as always, a huge shout out to my biggest supporters: Ilya Zakharova, Kirill Klimuk, Zeman Berze, Jimmy Albin, Petr Ilich, Bruce Etzenik and MHS. See you guys next time.